My boss laughed in my face when I told him his business practices were failing everyone. 3 months later, he lost everything and didn't even see it coming. If you've ever dreamed of serving justice to someone who wronged you, hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready for one of the most satisfying revenge stories you'll hear today. Imagine being forced to sit across from a man who looks you dead in the eyes and lies boldly, shamelessly, and with the kind of confidence only a lifetime of bullying others can create. Imagine knowing that behind his insults, behind his arrogance, behind his entitled smirk, he was hiding something darker, something rotten, something that deserved to burn. Now imagine being the one holding the match. Because that's exactly where I found myself sitting in a cramped, fluorescent-lit meeting room in a southern state, staring at a racist, incompetent business owner named Scott, while secretly preparing the very documents that would end his business forever. If you've ever wanted to watch karma kick down the door of someone who absolutely deserved it, hit that like button now. And if you love long, emotionally loaded, insanely satisfying revenge stories, subscribe, because this one is going to hit every nerve you have. I worked as an account manager for a digital marketing company, and part of my job was dealing with small business owners who wanted one thing: more customers. That was it. We sold ads, leads, tracking numbers, recorded calls, the whole digital package. And to protect ourselves, we had one rule: if you want our service guarantee, you must enable call tracking and call recording. Simple, logical, standard. But logic wasn't something my next client, Scott, believed in. In fact, if logic and professionalism were planets, Scott was floating somewhere outside the solar system entirely. His reputation already echoed through our office halls like a warning siren. Difficult, rude, impossible, racist. I didn't know how bad it truly was until I met him myself. Because the very first time I sat across from him, the first thing I noticed wasn't his handshake or his tone, it was the ease in which he disrespected people he thought were beneath him. My predecessor, a black account manager, had tried for months to schedule an in-person meeting. Scott always refused. Always busy, always unavailable, always not interested in meeting. But me, I'm white. And the moment I took over, suddenly he had time. Suddenly he wanted to talk. Suddenly he wanted to complain in person. And complain he did. For an hour straight. Scott ran a small father and son contracting company. Windows, drainage, small repairs. Things any halfway competent handyman could do in their sleep. But somehow Scott managed to turn everything he touched into chaos. He blamed customers. He blamed employees. And now he blamed us. According to him, we weren't generating enough leads. He deserved refunds, discounts, compensation. His voice dripped with entitlement. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. And the whole time, that smug half-smile never left his face, like he genuinely believed I was scared of him. And honestly, at first I was irritated. But then I realized something. Scott wasn't just arrogant. He wasn't just incompetent. He wasn't just rude. He was destructive. He was racist. And worst of all, he was convinced he would get away with it forever. That's when the anger inside me stopped burning hot and instead turned ice cold. Because cold anger plans. Cold anger calculates. Cold anger destroys. Scott demanded a refund, said we weren't meeting our guarantee. My manager told me to listen to the calls. All of them. Every incoming call from every customer over the past months. The report needed to be airtight. It may go to court, he warned. Be thorough. So I put on my headset, opened our dashboard, and hit play. I thought I'd be listening to a few missed calls, maybe some forgotten voicemails. Instead, what I heard made my jaw clench so tight it hurt. I heard a voice polite, calm, reasonable. A landlord with 3 properties. He'd met Scott. Scott gave him quotes. They agreed. The man literally wanted to pay him. And then the voicemail started. Hey, Scott, I'm calling to pay the deposit. Hi, Scott, just checking in. Haven't heard back. Hope everything's all right. Scott, please call me back. I really need to schedule the work. 4 voicemails. 4 opportunities. 4 chances to do a job he already secured. Scott ignored them all. For no reason. No explanation. No logic. Nothing. When I later called the landlord, myself under our standard quality assurance script, he told me he ended up hiring another company for 15% more. I don't get it, he said. Why would he ignore paying work? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. This call made my blood boil. The housing office called Scott with a massive opportunity-20-5 homes needing repairs. A contract worth thousands. Scott answered, cheerful at first. Then he asked the fatal question. What neighborhood? The housing agent told him. A predominantly Black and Hispanic area. Scott's tone changed instantly. Yeah, actually, I'm booked up. Lie. That's out of my service area. Another lie. He hung up on her. Didn't even say goodbye. And the worst part? The woman on the other end had no idea she'd just been discriminated against. This one cut deep. A U.S. service member. Calling from Japan. Time difference brutal, but he stayed awake just to reach Scott during business hours. His home back in the States was broken into. His wife was staying in a hotel. He needed a simple door replacement emergency work. He left a detailed message. Even gave an email. Scott ignored him too. No call. No follow-up. Nothing. A man serving his country. And Scott couldn't be bothered to lift a finger. After listening to dozens upon dozens of calls, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just frustration anymore. It was disbelief, disgust, a slow-burning realization that Scott wasn't failing because of us. He was failing because of himself. His incompetence wasn't a minor flaw. It was the foundation of his entire business. Every missed voicemail, every ignored emergency, every racially motivated refusal, they all formed a clear pattern. Scott was his own worst enemy. And now he wanted to blame us. My manager asked me to compile everything into a formal report. Not a summary. Not bullet points. A full legal-grade analysis in case Scott tried to take us to court. So for the next week, I lived inside that report. Every day after work, long after my coworkers left, I stayed in the office, replaying calls, transcribing dialogue, analyzing timestamps, matching leads to outcomes, and documenting every instance of negligence, discrimination, and customer abandonment. By the time I finished, the report was 24 pages of pure, data-backed destruction. And I knew, without a shred of doubt, that once Scott read it, he would never recover emotionally. But I wasn't done. Not even close. The report was brutal, professionally written, but unforgiving. Every section highlighted another failure in his customer handling, ignored calls, inadequate follow-up, unprofessional behavior, zero organization, blatant discrimination, and complete lack of basic business etiquette. I didn't hold back. I couldn't. The truth was too ugly to soften. When I handed the report to my manager, he stared at the front page for a long moment. 24 pages, huh? He said. Yeah, I replied, exhausted but proud. He raised an eyebrow. Is it bad? I just nodded. It's everything. He smirked. Good, I'll review it. VP will too. We'll talk tomorrow. And that was the moment I realized something. Management wasn't annoyed. They weren't worried. They weren't even neutral. They were angry too. Scott had been a problem for years, abusing staff, wasting resources, filing complaints, demanding refunds, acting like he owned the company. And finally, someone had documented everything. For the first time, we had leverage. The next day, my manager walked into my office with the report in hand. He closed the door and took a deep breath. We read it, he said simply. My stomach tensed. And? He smiled. A slow, satisfied smile. It's perfect. Relief washed over me. So, what now? I asked. We want your recommendation. That surprised me. My recommendation? Yes, he said. You listened to every call. You studied every detail. What do you think we should do with Scott? And that was the moment everything clicked. This wasn't just business. This was justice. This was accountability. This was the universe handing me the knife and saying, go ahead. Cut the rope holding this man up. So I told him the truth. Drop all his discounts, I said. Charge him the full rate. No special pricing. No deals. No negotiation. My manager raised an eyebrow. He'll cancel, I shrugged. Good. He stared at me. And then slowly he nodded. All right, he said. Full rate it is. My pulse quickened. Because that was the first step. The first domino. We scheduled a meeting with Scott, a face-to-face. My manager would be present, not because we needed him, but because it would rattle Scott, and I wanted Scott rattled. I wanted him to walk into that meeting believing he was in control, only to have the ground pulled out from under him. That night, I opened my laptop and created PowerPoint, clean, organized, professional, and absolutely devastating. Slide after slide detailing his failures, his ignored calls, his dropped leads, his discriminatory behavior, his negligence, his incompetence. And the moment I finished the last slide, I felt something unexpected. Calm, that steady, cold calm that comes right before a storm. Because I knew that in less than 24 hours, Scott's world was going to tilt. And I was going to be the one tipping it. I barely slept that night. Not because I was nervous, but because my brain couldn't stop replaying the upcoming confrontation. I imagined Scott's face when we presented the numbers. I imagined the twitch in his jaw, the way his voice would rise when he realized he couldn't wiggle his way out, the exact moment he would understand that he couldn't bully me the way he'd bullied so many others before. This wasn't just a meeting. This was a reckoning. And for the first time in my career, I looked forward to it. Scott arrived 10 minutes late, rude as always. He stormed into the room with that arrogant attitude he always carried, like the world owed him something. My manager sat beside me, silent, calm, observing. I noticed Scott didn't even greet him, just slammed into the chair and said, "Let's get this over with." Perfect. The angrier he came in, the harder he would fall. I clicked to the first slide. Scott crossed his arms. Yeah, whatever. Get to the part where you admit you screwed up. His tone was dripping with hostility. I didn't react. I just clicked through each slide slowly, methodically, explaining the lead flow, call volume, customer behavior, and every single missed opportunity. With every click, Scott's face darkened. He tried interrupting. My manager shut him down. When Scott finally snapped, "Just tell me the damn conclusion," I clicked to the last slide, and everything went silent. As the weeks rolled on, I silently gathered every possible clue about Mr. Harlan's secret dealings. I never confronted him directly, because I had already learned that confronting a man who thrives on manipulation only feeds his confidence. What he feared most wasn't anger, it was exposure, and exposure was exactly what I planned to deliver. Every night after finishing my shift, I would sit in the dim corner of my small apartment with a cheap notebook and a flickering table lamp and write down everything I heard or saw: strange transactions, late-night calls, people visiting his office who didn't belong in any charitable organization. Everything was recorded. Every whisper mattered. It became my obsession. This wasn't petty revenge anymore. This was justice for every student he had ever stepped on, including me. But I made sure to stay invisible, quiet, obedient, predictable. I delivered perfect assignments. I worked extra hours at the campus help center. I acted like someone who had given up the fight. That was part of the plan. Mr. Harlan believed he had broken me, and that illusion became my greatest weapon. One evening, I overheard something that pushed my plan into overdrive. Mr. Harlan was planning to divert nearly half of our scholarship fund into a private cultural project run by one of his friends. Every student who relied on those funds would suffer. And the worst part? He didn't care. In that moment, I knew something with absolute certainty. This revenge wouldn't just be personal. It would be public. I realized quickly that taking down a man as powerful as Mr. Harlan couldn't be done alone. I needed someone on the inside, someone who despised him just as much as I did. And that's when I remembered Daniela, former top student who mysteriously left the university a year earlier. Rumor said Mr. Harlan destroyed his final project and accused him of plagiarism with fabricated evidence. If anyone had a reason to help me, it was him. I found Daniel working part-time at a small repair shop in the old part of town. His face had changed. The confident spark in his eyes was replaced with exhaustion. When I told him why I was there, he looked at me for a long moment before saying, "If you're doing this to hurt him, you'll fail. But if you're doing this to end him, I'm in." From that day, we formed a silent alliance. We met only at night, never in public spaces. And we communicated through handwritten notes we burned after reading. Daniel had documents, screenshots, emails, statements all proving how Mr. Harlan had framed him. And together, we crafted a bigger plan. One that wouldn't just expose a single crime, but his entire system of corruption. Our plan relied on one thing: timing. Mr. Harlan looked untouchable because he carefully controlled every narrative. But there was one day of the year when he lost that control, the annual Scholarship Expo. This event was nationally broadcast, and dozens of partnered organizations attended. If he were exposed there, his reputation wouldn't just crack, it would shatter forever. Daniel and I spent 2 weeks gathering final evidence. I obtained access to the administrative printer late at night and secretly copied financial reports, letters to donors, and internal approvals that showed how he was misusing funds. Daniel handled the technical side. He built a timed presentation that would auto-launch in the middle of Mr. Harlan's speech, projecting every piece of evidence on the physics on the massive LED screen. He even added recorded voice notes that Mr. Harlan had sent to donors, mocking students who think they deserve financial aid. We were ready. The trap was built. All that was left was patience. Impatience, when fueled by revenge, becomes a weapon sharper than anything else. The night before the Scholarship Expo, I couldn't sleep. My heart kept racing between fear and excitement. I kept replaying every detail of the plan in my mind, every USB drive, every hidden file, every schedule we had synchronized. There was no going back now. If we failed, Mr. Harlan would make sure our academic careers were destroyed forever. But if we succeeded, then every student he hurt, every dream he crushed, would finally get justice. I sat by my window staring at the campus. Across the street, the lights in the administration building were still on, which meant Harlan was there, probably rehearsing his fake speech about compassion and educational integrity. The hypocrisy made my blood boil. I whispered to myself, tomorrow is the last day you hurt anyone. My phone buzzed. It was Daniel. He sent a single message. Everything set. Whatever happens tomorrow, don't hesitate. I nodded to myself, even though he couldn't see it. We weren't just seeking revenge anymore. We were about to rewrite the entire power structure of the university. The next morning, the campus felt different. There was a tension in the air, like everyone sensed something big was about to happen. The auditorium was decorated with banners, promotional stands, and smiling volunteers, but behind the polished surface, our secret was hiding, waiting to explode. I took my seat in the 4th row, exactly where we planned. Daniel was backstage disguised as a tech assistant, holding the control device that would activate the presentation. At the right moment, Mr. Harlan walked onto the stage wearing his usual confident smile. He loved the spotlight. He loved the praise. He loved pretending to be the savior of students he secretly despised. He started his speech with dramatic pauses and fake sincerity, talking about how the university prioritizes integrity and nurtures future leaders. Every sentence felt like a slap to the face of every student he wronged. I clenched my fists, waiting for the signal. When the clock hit the exact minute we planned, I saw Daniel appear behind the curtain. He looked at me once and nodded. That was a no turning back. Every muscle in my body tightened with adrenaline. I reached into my bag, pulled out a small remote, my part of the plan, and waited for Harlan to move to the center of the stage. He always paused there for dramatic effect, right before switching to the financial presentation. That pause was our window. As soon as he said the words, "Now let me show you our transparent funding model," both Daniel and I pressed our remotes. At the same exact second, the auditorium screen, glitched. Everyone murmured in confusion. Harlan froze. The screen turned black for half a heartbeat. Then everything changed. Documents, emails, recordings, every piece of evidence we collected flashed across the giant screen for the entire crowd to see. His voice recordings mocking poor students echoed through the hall. Emails proving financial theft appeared line after line. Invoices, secret transactions, fake signatures, everything. He turned pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The audience was in shock. Some gasped, some stood up, others pulled out their phones, recording everything. The truth was finally too big to hide. For a moment, the entire auditorium felt frozen, like time itself was holding its breath. Then the reactions came fast and loud. Parents shouted in disbelief. Students cried out in anger. Donors looked horrified as their names appeared in email chains they never approved. The noise grew into a storm of outrage. Mr. Harlan's single quotes confident posture crumbled. Instantly, he staggered back from the podium, his face turning red, then white, then a sickly shade of gray. He tried raising his hands to calm the audience, but every word he attempted was swallowed by the furious shouting. No one wanted to hear him anymore. No one feared him anymore. His power, the thing he relied on to crush people, was slipping from his hands like sand. In a trembling voice, he finally managed to scream, "This is fabricated. This is a cyber attack. Someone is trying to sabotage the university." But his lies sounded weak even to himself. Why? Because the evidence wasn't just words on a screen. There were voice messages, video clips, bank statements with his signature. Everything matched perfectly. A group of donors marched straight toward the stage demanding explanations. Some faculty members, who always pretended to support him, quickly stepped away, as if distancing themselves could erase their past. Obedience. Harlan's desperation grew visible. He kept pointing at the technicians backstage, screaming, "Turn it off. Shut this down." But none of them moved. They were frozen, staring at the monstrous truth of the man they had been working for. The louder he shouted, the more pathetic he looked. This was no longer the powerful dean of discipline. This was a cornered liar, watching his empire collapse. Campus security rushed toward the stage, not to help Harlan, but to secure the area. The auditorium had turned into chaos. People arguing, students filming from every angle, reporters from partnered organizations whispering urgently into their microphones. Security escorted Harlan toward the exit. But even while being held by the arms, he kept yelling, "I built this place. You're all nothing without me." His voice cracked mid-sentence. The arrogance was gone. All that remained was fear. As they dragged him away, students began clapping, not because they celebrated his suffering, but because truth had finally won. It was the loudest applause I had ever heard inside that auditorium, and I knew this was only the beginning. The event ended immediately. The press flooded the campus. Students gathered in groups, discussing the scandal. Some were crying, not out of sadness, but relief that someone had finally exposed what everyone had quietly suspected for years. Doors to the administration building were locked. Harlan's office was sealed pending investigation. Everyone was talking about the mysterious video leak. No one suspected me. No one suspected Daniel. We walked separately, blending into the crowd, functioning like ghosts among the chaos. But we felt something deep inside us, something powerful, something freeing. In that moment, I realized revenge isn't about hurting the person who hurt you. Revenge is about making sure they can't hurt anyone ever again. By the next morning, the university was a battlefield of rumors, official notices, and emergency meetings. A special committee was formed overnight to investigate the evidence that had been displayed at the expo, and this time, there was no way for Harlan to manipulate anything because the pressure wasn't just internal. The entire internet had seen the scandal. Within hours, the leaked presentation from the auditorium had spread across social media. Hundreds of thousands of views, thousands of comments, alumni demanding accountability, parents threatening legal action, donors froze their sponsorships until the truth was confirmed. The university had no choice but to act fast. Harlan was placed on immediate suspension while the investigation proceeded. His access to all administrative systems was revoked, and his office was sealed with bright red tape. No one called him sir anymore. No one defended him anymore. His power had evaporated. Suddenly, everyone who once feared him found the courage to speak up. Students came forward with stories from years ago. Faculty admitted they'd been pressured or silenced, and even staff members exposed unexplained financial transactions. The investigation grew so large that external auditors were brought in from a distance. I watched everything unfold quietly. And with every passing hour, Harlan's downfall became more permanent. 2 days into the investigation, the committee leaked a massive bombshell. They had uncovered a private storage drive hidden in Harlan's old computer. It contained recordings he made of himself dictating plans, insulting students, and discussing illegal fund diversions. Harlan had recorded everything because he believed he would never get caught. He wanted control, and recording everything gave him a sense of security. But now, those recordings were the very knife cutting through the last threads of his career. One audio file in particular went viral instantly. In it, Harlan mocked the entire scholarship system, laughing and saying, "Students think we owe them something. They're lucky I even allow them inside this institution." It was over. He couldn't lie his way out. He couldn't blame anyone else. His own voice had delivered the confession the world needed. A week later, I was called to the administrative building for an official statement meeting. My heart pounded as I entered the conference room. The committee members sat around a long table, serious expressions on their faces. They asked if I had ever seen strange behavior from Harlan, if he had ever interfered with my scholarship, if I had ever faced mistreatment from him. I told them everything calmly, truthfully, carefully. They didn't know I was the one who exposed him, and I had no intention of revealing that part of the story. They just wanted honest accounts from students who had been affected. When I finished, One of the committee members sighed and said, "We deeply apologize for everything you've been through." Hearing those words felt strange after years of being silenced, manipulated, and ignored. Someone was finally acknowledging what had been done to us. But evil never accepts defeat quietly. On the 9th day of the investigation, Harlan attempted his final desperate move. He tried holding a private press conference outside his home, claiming he was innocent, claiming the university betrayed him, claiming he was the victim of a conspiracy. He even tried faking tears in front of the cameras. But the journalists weren't fools. They confronted him with his own recordings, his own emails, his own signatures. His lies collapsed instantly. In the middle of his broken speech, his wife stepped out from behind him and whispered something in his ear. His shoulders fell. His expression went blank. And for the first time in his life, he looked genuinely powerless. The press conference ended within minutes. It was the last public appearance he ever made. By this point, Harlan's empire was crumbling. He had lost credibility, students, donors, and the trust of his faculty. Every meeting he tried to schedule was canceled. Emails went unanswered, and contractors he once relied on refused to work with him. The university board began formal proceedings to terminate his contract permanently. My part in this? Completely invisible. No one suspected me. No one could trace the chain of events back to the student who had endured years of abuse and neglect. I stayed silent, watching quietly as the consequences unfolded. Each day, another domino fell. Harlan's private accounts were audited. Every suspicious transaction brought up. Every misuse of funds meticulously cataloged. Those who had once feared his wrath now whispered his name with contempt instead of respect. And through it all, I felt a sense of satisfaction so deep it was almost physical. A tight, warm coil in my chest that relaxed only when I knew another layer of his misdeeds had been exposed. Meanwhile, Daniel and I coordinated with other students who had quietly gathered evidence over the years. Those students were shocked to learn their stories were being validated publicly, that finally someone in a position to affect change had acted decisively. Daniel continued providing technical support from behind the scenes, ensuring that no file was missing, no recording corrupted, no evidence lost. Everyone who had suffered under Harlan's cruelty suddenly found their voices amplified, and the system he relied upon for intimidation and control had been flipped entirely. The students who had once felt powerless now had leverage, proof, validation, and a community united by shared injustice. I watched quietly as courage spread like wildfire across the campus, and I realized the greatest revenge wasn't in confrontation, it was in dismantling his power piece by piece, systematically, without a single shot fired in anger. Harlan's downfall was complete when a leaked internal memo reached the press. Memo detailed financial diversions, mismanagement, and blatant favoritism, all signed and approved by Harlan himself. Journalists published detailed stories, and overnight, Harlan became a national scandal. The irony was exquisite. He had spent his life cultivating an image of benevolence, of integrity, of power, and yet it was his own meticulous record-keeping and arrogance that guaranteed his collapse. Social media erupted with commentary, memes, and analysis. Former students shared experiences that validated every accusation. Investigative journalists dug deeper, revealing more patterns of abuse than anyone could have imagined. All of it documented, all of it public, and all of it unstoppable. Harlan had no allies left. Even his own friends distanced themselves, afraid of collateral damage. The man who had once walked tall, shaming students and staff alike, was now reduced to a whisper in the halls he once dominated. Through all of this, I never stepped into the spotlight. My role remained hidden. My revenge was complete, not in confrontation, but in orchestration. It was subtle, perfectly executed, and devastatingly effective. The man who had tormented so many was gone from power. He couldn't rebuild because the seeds of his own arrogance and cruelty had been exposed to everyone who mattered. And the feeling that coursed through me then, calm, righteous, utterly satisfying, was one I had never known before. I knew I had righted wrongs, not just for myself, but for every student, faculty member, and donor who had silently suffered in his shadow. While others celebrated, he disappeared. While others reported, he hid. While others thrived, he crumbled. The balance had been restored. Looking back now, I realize that revenge isn't about rage or bitterness. It's about justice. When someone wields power to harm, control, or intimidate, letting that go unchecked only teaches them that cruelty works. Revenge, when executed with patience, intelligence, and precision, can restore balance not just for yourself, but for everyone affected by the injustice. I never saw glory or recognition. My goal was simple: to ensure that a man who had thrived on oppression could no longer hurt anyone else. The satisfaction I felt wasn't in seeing him fail, it was in knowing that truth, integrity, and fairness prevailed. Years of fear, silence, and manipulation were finally overturned by careful observation, strategic planning, and unwavering resolve. Learned that revenge is most powerful when it's invisible, when it's surgical, when it leaves no question that justice was served. From this experience, I learned a few invaluable lessons. First, never underestimate the power of patience. Observing, collecting information, and waiting for the right moment can accomplish more than confrontation ever could. Second, revenge must be calculated. Impulsive actions often backfire, but careful planning, like a chess match, ensures that every move serves a purpose. Third, justice doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be public. Quietly orchestrating consequences behind the scenes can be more satisfying and effective than any dramatic showdown. Finally, I learned that true power lies not in domination, but in integrity. In protecting others and ensuring fairness. I discovered a strength I didn't know I had, and that strength made the entire endeavor worthwhile. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and share it with someone who loves a story of clever, well-earned revenge. Tell us in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever witnessed? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that combine drama, justice, and clever payback. You won't want to miss the next one. Remember, revenge doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, and that whisper can change everything.